At
Did
a
you really
glamorous
think he
gala,
loved you?
Alara's heart was
He was
shattered in
laughing at
public.
you the whole
Her
time.
husband betrayed her, his mistress mocked her, and the world watched her fall. But sometimes, rock bottom comes where true power wakes up. Alara turned pain into purpose, and her name into a lantern for others.
Are you
If this
certain you want
story
to proceed?
inspires
This
you,
will ruin
please give
them.
one like
Good.
and one
They
share to
deserve it.
support our
We
next
proceed as
stories.
planned.
Thanks for watching.
Alara's
I warned you
hand
this
trembled,
wouldn't end well.
the champagne flute
If they
shaking
discover
with
the
it.
truth about us,
Her rival
we lose
Sass' laugh
everything.
cut through the party chatter, as sharp and cruel as broken glass. "Tears, darling?" "So common," Serafina whispered, her voice like poisoned honey. "William needs a diamond, not some wilting flower." Alara just stood there, a ghost in a borrowed dress, as her whole world crumbled for everyone to see. To them, she was just a quiet artist, the forgotten wife. But Serafina and her cheating husband had no idea. The blood in Alara's veins was older than the city itself, and worth more than all their pathetic ambitions. They were about to learn that you'd mock a Blackwood. It's a mistake you only make once. The affair didn't start with a huge fight or a suspicious receipt. It was quiet. It was the way William Vance, her husband, began looking right through her. His eyes were set on some future she clearly wasn't part of. He'd come home late from his tech startup, Vance Innovations, smelling of a perfume that wasn't hers, a sharp, bold scent of sandalwood and jasmine. Nothing like her soft vanilla and lavender. Alara did her best to ignore it, blaming it on stress. William was risking everything on the big Starlight Foundation Gala. This was his one chance to win over the investors who could save his company. With a tight smile, he told her, "Our entire future is riding on tonight." He needed her on his arm, playing the role of the perfect, supportive wife. "Just for a few hours, Ellie," he had begged. "Just smile, look pretty, and I handle the rest." And she agreed like she always did. Alara was a watercolor artist whose soul was made of soft colors and quiet landscapes. She saw the world in gentle shades, not the harsh reality of betrayal. She had willingly tucked away her own amazing talent, letting her identity shrink to just Mrs. Vance. She managed their small brownstone in Brooklyn and her quiet rooftop garden. She was the calm, steady ground where William built his frantic dreams. Her family, the Blackwoods, had never really trusted the marriage. "He doesn't see you, Alara," her older brother Marcus had warned. His voice was low and firm, like the surface of his boardroom table. "He just sees a comfortable idea." Her father, Alistair, a man whose name was spoken with respect in the circles of old money and power, simply looked at her with knowing, sad eyes. "Remember who you are," he had said, "even when you let someone else give you a name." But she ignored their worries, thinking they were just being too protective. They couldn't understand that she craved a simple, normal life. She wanted love, not a legacy. And she chose William because, to him, she wasn't a Blackwood. To him, she was just Alara May, an orphan, with a small inheritance and a talent for painting. It was a secret she carefully kept. She had built a private world where she could be loved for herself. Now, its walls were caving in. On the day of the gala, the lie shattered. As she picked up William's suit from the cleaners, a small velvet box fell from his coat pocket. This wasn't a box for some cheap little gift. It was from Cartier. Her heart pounded as she slowly opened it. Inside, resting on black silk, was a diamond necklace. It was a cascade of fire and ice, so brilliant it hurt to look at, and it was not for her. Her birthday was 2 months ago. Their anniversary was not until spring. This was a present for someone else. That evening, while fastening the simple pearl earrings her mother had given her, she saw it. The proof was on William's phone, lying on the dresser. A text from Serafina. "Can't wait for tonight. I'll be wearing your gift. Let's show them all what real power looks like. W&S forever." The breath caught in her throat like a silent scream as the room began to spin. William and Serafina. It was real. The perfume, the late nights, the empty space in their bed, it all came crashing down on her. He wasn't just having an affair. He was building a new life, a new power couple right under her nose, and tonight he was bringing his clueless wife into the same room as his mistress. The whole thing felt like a setup, a cruel, deliberate joke. "Ellie, you ready?" William called from downstairs, his voice syrupy with fake cheer. She stared at her reflection, at the pale woman with haunted eyes staring back. The simple navy dress felt like a costume. For a moment, she wanted to smash the mirror, just run away or call her father, and let the Blackwood family crush this pathetic little man. But then a different feeling rose in her chest, something cold and hard like a stone. No, she would not run. She would go to that gala. She would be Mrs. Vance one last time and watch him put on his show. She had to see the woman Sen he had sold her out for. The gala was at Cipriani on Wall Street, a giant temple of money with soaring marble columns meant to make everyone inside feel small. The air buzzed with conversation, clinking glasses, and the scent of money, a mix of ambition and expensive perfume. Ursula felt William's hand on the small of her back, a possessive touch that now felt like a brand. He guided her through the crowd, a charming, confident smile plastered on his face that never quite reached his eyes. He was a master performer. "Darling, that's Arthur Harrison from the Harrison Group. I need 5 minutes. Just stand here and look lovely, won't you?" He squeezed her arm in order, disguised as affection, then abandoned her by a massive flower arrangement. And just like that, Alara was invisible again. She didn't fit in this ocean of champagne. Women in designer gowns and dripping with jewels gave her simple dress dismissive glances. Men in tailored tuxedos looked right past her, scanning for someone more important. She was just an accessory her owner had set down for a moment. And then she saw her. Serafina Dubois didn't just walk into a room, she conquered it. She was breathtaking in a red Alexander McQueen gown that clung to her powerful figure. Her hair was a sheet of black silk, and around her neck, blazing like a string of captured stars, was a Cartier necklace. It was a declaration of war disguised as jewelry. She was not by herself. She was holding court with a group of admirers, all laughing at something clever she said. William, done with Mr. Harrison, was drawn to her like a moth to a raging fire. Alara watched with a strange, cold detachment as her husband approached the other woman. He didn't touch her, not at first, but the look he gave her was more intimate than any kiss. He leaned in, whispered something, and Serafina's laugh rang out, deep and triumphant. They were a perfect portrait of power, beauty, and betrayal, and everyone was watching. The whispers started to follow them around the room. "That's William Vance. They say his company is the next big thing, and that's Serafina Dubois. Her father owns half the media in this city." Alara never knew that. William hadn't just found a mistress. He had brokered an upgrade, a business merger. Alara felt that familiar burn behind her eyes and fled to a dark terrace, desperate for air that didn't taste like lies. The cool night air felt good on her skin, but it couldn't cool the burning shame inside her. She had been such a fool. She believed in their quiet life, in the promises he whispered in their small Brooklyn kitchen. It was all a lie. He never wanted a partner. He just wanted a placeholder until a better offer came along. A single tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. She wiped it away furiously, but it was too late. A shadow moved over her. Well, well, look what we have here." Serafina stood in the doorway, a champagne flute in her hand. The diamonds on her throat seemed to mock Alara's simple pearls. Her smile was that of a predator. "Hiding out here all alone? Don't you know the help is supposed to use the back entrance?" Serafina's eyes raked over Alara's plain dress, her lack of jewelry, and her tear-streaked face. The contempt was so thick it was suffocating. Emma stood there, frozen, speechless. This was her, the woman wearing her husband's affection like a trophy she'd won. "Let me give you some advice," Serafina said. Stepping closer, her voice dropped to a toxic whisper. "Men like William don't want a watercolor. They want an oil painting." Something bold, expensive, and something to show off. You're just beige. A nice, comfortable, totally forgettable shade of beige. She took a slow sip of champagne, her eyes fixed on Ilara's. He's going to be a titan in his industry. He needs a titan beside him. Nada. What is it you do again? Play with paints in some dusty little apartment. Every single word was a perfectly aimed dart, striking Ilara's deepest insecurities. Ilara had made herself small to fit inside William's world, and now this woman was mocking her for that very sacrifice. The tears she'd fought so hard to control finally welled up, blurring the city lights behind Serafina. She hated herself for her weakness, for letting this cruel woman see her cry. "Tears, darling!" Serafina's laugh was the final, crushing blow. How utterly common. You really should go home. This party is for winners. You just remind everyone of where he came from. With a last, dismissive flick of her wrist, Serafina turned and walked back into the warmth of the gala, leaving Ilara alone in the cold. Her quiet world didn't just crack, it shattered. Ilara just stood there, the cold railing chilling her hands. Serafina's words bounced around in her head, each one a new cut. Beige, forgettable, humble. She wasn't just the wife who was cheated on. To them, she was a weight holding William back, one he was about to drop. Tears rolled down her face, hot trails of shame on her cold cheeks. It wasn't just his betrayal. It was the pain of being so misunderstood, so completely underestimated. For 5 years, she'd made herself smaller so he could feel bigger, and she thought that was love. But now she knew the truth. She had been a fool. Her hand shook as she pulled her phone from her purse. Her thumb paused over her father's name, Alistair Blackwood. One call to him, and William Vance's life would be a pile of ash by morning. Her father could destroy empires with just a whisper. He could crush William's little startup, ruin Serafina's media mogul father, and just wipe them from society. But that would be too easy. It would be her father's win, not hers. She'd be the little girl running to her daddy for help. The woman Serafina made fun of would be gone, but Ilara would still be watching her own life from the sidelines. No. She needed her family, but not to fight her battles for her. She needed them to watch her fight. She needed them to stand with her while she took her life back. Her thumb scrolled down her contacts and stopped on Liam. Liam Blackwood, her youngest brother, was the charming face of the family. He was a sharp lawyer with a winning smile and eyes that saw every lie. He was the soft glove on the family's iron hand. He picked up on the second ring, his voice full of warmth and worry. Ilara, it is after midnight in London. Is everything okay?" "No, Liam, it is not," she said, her voice rough as she held back sobs. "Nothing is okay." She didn't need to explain. The Blackwoods always knew what was left unsaid. She just had to tell him where it hurt. "I am at the Starlight Foundation Gala at Cipriani on Wall Street." She took a deep, shaky breath, her voice growing firm. "William is here with another woman." There was a short pause, but it wasn't from surprise. It was the quiet of a hunter catching a scent. "I see," Liam said, his warm voice turning cold and dangerous. "Marcus and father are here with me. We just closed our deal with the Sterling Consortium." Alora's heart leaped. They were all in London, all together. It was either impossible luck or it was destiny. "Liam," she said, her voice dropping to match his intensity. "He is about to give a speech. He is trying to get his final funding from Arthur Harrison and some others. His entire future, everything he built while I was silent, depends on tonight." Another pause, this one shorter. She could almost hear the wheels turning in his mind, the plan already forming, and the woman. "Serafina Dubois, daughter of Robin Dubois from DMN Media," Ilara answered, the name tasting like poison. "Understood," Liam said. She heard him talking to someone. Then he was back, his voice clear and final. "The Blackwood jet is on the runway at Heathrow. We can be in New York in less than 6 hours. Can you wait that long, Ellie?" 6 hours. It felt like forever. but thinking of her family flying across the ocean for her, of the storm that was coming to this perfect party, gave her strength. "What are you going to do?" she asked, even though she already knew. They were not coming to talk. The Blackwoods were never subtle. "We are coming to get you, sister." Liam's voice was grim but comforting, "and we are going to remind a few people what happens when you break a contract in this case. A marriage contract. Just be strong. Do not let them see you crumble." "We are on our way." He hung up. Alora looked at her dark phone. 6 hours. She stood up straight, pulling away from the railing. She walked back to the ballroom, her steps sure and steady. She wasn't the crying wife on the balcony anymore. She was a time bomb. She went back inside and found a small, empty table in a dark corner, the perfect spot to watch everything unfold. She ordered a glass of water and drank it slowly, her eyes locked on William. He was near the main stage, laughing with Serafina and charming the investors. He looked so sure of himself, like a king about to get his crown. He had no clue that a hurricane was coming for him from across the sea. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold calm. The hunt was over. Now, she was just waiting for her pack to show up. The next few hours felt like a strange, slow dance of lies. From her dark corner, Alora watched William own the room. He was charming, and his excitement for Vance Innovations was catching on. He talked about algorithms and changing the market, about a future he claimed he was building alone. Investors who were on the fence, like the serious Arthur Harrison, started to look impressed, nodding along with genuine interest. Serafina played her part perfectly. She would join a conversation, touch an investor's arm and whisper, "William is just a genius. Buying into Vance Innovations is not just an investment, it is a legacy." She was selling them as a team, the next big power couple. At one point, William's eyes met Alora's across the room. A flash of anger crossed his face, a silent order for her to either play her part or get out. She stared back, her face unreadable. He was the first to look away, turning back to his new friends. He had already written her off. To him, she was just a mess he would clean up later. Finally, the host of the Gala, a local news anchor, walked onto the stage. And now, it is my great pleasure to introduce a man whose vision will change the future of data analytics. Please give a big welcome to the founder and CEO of Vance Innovations, Mr. William Vance. A polite applause started, then grew louder. William walked onto the stage with a huge smile, waving. He glanced at Serafina, who blew him a small kiss. He was on top of the world. "Thank you. Thank you," he started, his voice practiced and strong. "Tonight, we are here to support the amazing work of the Starlight Foundation. But we are also here because we believe in the future. A future of new ideas, of progress. A future run by Vance Innovations." As he started his speech, Alora's phone buzzed. It was a simple text from Liam. "Landed. 20 minutes. For the first time all night, a real smile touched Alora's lips. The clock was about to strike 12, and just like that, the show began. It was so small at first, you could barely notice it. A young event planner rushed to the gala organizer, whispering quickly in her ear. The organizer's face turned white. She started talking into her headset, her eyes jumping nervously toward the main entrance. Then Arthur Harrison, the main investor William needed, pulled out his phone. His eyes went wide as he read a message. He looked at William on stage, his expression changing from interested to worried. He tapped the shoulder of another investor, a man named Peterson, and showed him the screen. Peterson's jaw clenched. In just a few minutes, a quiet panic started to ripple through the most important guests. Phones came out, and urgent, quiet conversations began. The whole feeling in the room changed from a party to a crisis. William, lost in the stage lights and his own pride, saw nothing. He was getting to his big finish, his voice filled with passion. And with a final round of funding, which I am happy to announce we are closing tonight, Vance Innovations will not just compete, it will take over. He was met with a weak, confused applause. The energy in the room was gone. He looked lost, his confident smile starting to fade. He scanned the crowd, looking for Serafina. She just gave him a confused shrug, her own perfect calm starting to crack. And that is when the main doors of Cipriani swung open. They did not crash open. They opened with a quiet, heavy power that seemed to pull all the sound from the room. All the talking stopped. Everyone turned to look. Standing in the huge doorway were three men. They were not dressed for a party. They were in dark, perfectly fitted business suits that seemed to swallow the light. They moved with the quiet confidence of true power, not the loud swagger of new money. In the front was Alistair Blackwood. His hair was silver. His face showed the lines of 1,000 tough deals. His sharp, ice-blue eyes scanned the room with a look of deep disappointment, like a father looking at a mess his son had made. To his right was Marcus Blackwood, the CEO of the multi-billion-dollar Blackwood Corporation. He was tall and serious, his face like stone. He held a tablet, his expression showing a cold, controlled rage. And on his left was Liam Blackwood, looking perfectly calm as he prepared to release the storm he had created. He caught Alora's eye from across the room, giving a tiny, almost unnoticeable nod. The pack had arrived. They moved forward, their footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. Security guards, clearly on new orders, flanked them, clearing a path through the frozen crowd. Whispers started, quiet at first, then raced through the room like a wildfire. "Oh my God, is that Alistair Blackwood? What is he doing here? He hasn't been to a public event in 10 years. That's Marcus Blackwood. They say he could bankrupt a country with one phone call." The Blackwoods were here. William stood on stage, completely paralyzed. His speech was gone. His moment of glory had just turned to ash. He glanced from the men to Alora in her corner, and for the first time, a look of pure terror and recognition washed over his face. Serafina was also frozen, her perfect socialite mask completely crumbling. She knew who these men were, the true gods of this world, beings from a level so far above her she couldn't possibly comprehend it. The three Blackwood men walked right to the foot of the stage, their eyes locked on the man trapped in the spotlight. The king's reign was over. His executioners had arrived. The silence in the grand hall of Cipriani wasn't just quiet anymore. It was something you could feel, heavy and suffocating in the air. William Vance stood on the stage, at the spotlight now feeling less like a celebration and more like an interrogation lamp. He stared down at the three men who had just brought his entire world to a crashing halt. His face was a mask of disbelief. Liam Blackwood, always the performer, was the first to move. He gracefully stepped onto the stage, took the mic from William's limp hand, and spoke to the captivated audience. "Good evening," he said, his voice calm, but it carried to every corner of the room. It was the voice of a man used to commanding the full attention of a courtroom. "I apologize for the interruption. My name is Liam Blackwood. My brother Marcus, my father Alistair, and I are here for a rather urgent family matter." He paused, letting the weight of his family name sink in. Then he turned his gaze from the audience to William, a cold smile on his lips. "Mr. Vance, that was a very impressive speech, full of passion, full of ambition." He then looked across the room, his eyes finding Alora, and he held out a hand toward her. "But it seems you forgot to introduce the most important person in your life. Your wife." He waited. Every single head in the room turned to follow his stare, landing on the quiet woman in the navy dress who had been ignored all night. She stood up from her chair and, with a grace she never knew she had, started walking to the stage. The crowd parted for her as if she were royalty. Liam's smile grew wider as she got closer. "We're here for our sister," he announced, his voice crystal clear. "Alora Blackwood." The name landed in the room like a punch. You could hear a collective gasp. Alora Blackwood. Not May, not some poor orphan artist. A Blackwood. She was the daughter of Alistair, the sister of Marcus and Liam. An heiress to one of the most powerful and private family fortunes in the world. All the color drained from William's face. He looked like a man who was watching his own ghost crawl out of its grave. He stumbled backward, his mouth hanging open, but no sound came out. Serafina's reaction was even more extreme. The smug, confident mask she always wore cracked and fell apart, showing a face twisted in pure shock and panic. Her Cartier necklace suddenly looked cheap and tacky. She had made fun of a Blackwood. She had called a Blackwood beige. The size of her mistake was so huge, it was almost funny. Elara reached the stage. Liam took her hand and helped her up the last step. She stood next to him, no longer a shrinking violet, but a woman standing between giants. She looked at William, her eyes clear and cold. There was no hate in her gaze, just a deep and final sense of pity. Then Marcus stepped forward. He didn't even bother to get on the stage. He didn't have to. His voice was low, emotionless, and absolutely crushing. He looked up at William, tapping the screen of his tablet. William Vance, Marcus started, sounding like a chief executive officer delivering a terrible quarterly report. As of 10 minutes ago, your main investor, the Sterling Hayes Fund, was bought out in a hostile takeover by a branch of the Blackwood Corporation. Their first official act was to pull their investment in Vance Innovations, effective immediately. William swayed. "No, you can't." "I can," Marcus replied, his voice slicing through William's weak protests. "And what's more, that big loan you took out last quarter to stay in business. We bought all of it this morning. The bank that handles your business and personal credit. My father has been on their board for 30 years. Right now, your company is broke. Your assets are frozen, and every bit of credit you have is gone." He glanced from William to a pale Arthur Harrison in the crowd. "For any of you thinking about investing in this project," Marcus said, his lip curling with disgust, "I would strongly suggest you reconsider. The Blackwood Corporation doesn't invest in failures, and we are extremely protective of our assets." The message was perfectly clear. Vance Innovations was not just dead, it was toxic. The investors, including Mr. Harrison, started to physically back away, putting space between themselves and William, as if he had the plague. Finally, Alistair Blackwood, who had been silent this whole time, stepped forward. He wasn't loud like Liam or cold like Marcus. His power was quiet, in the immense, crushing weight of his presence. He looked only at his daughter. "Elara," he said, his voice full of a gentle fatherly sadness, "are you ready to come home?" Elara looked at the shell of her husband on the stage, then at the terrified face of his mistress in the crowd. She looked at the mess that was the life she had tried to build, and she felt nothing at all. Just a deep feeling of freedom. She nodded to her father. "Yes, Papa, I am." Alistair then looked up at William for the first and only time. He did not say a single word. The look in his eyes said it all, pure contempt and judgment. In that one look, William Vance was not just bankrupt, he was erased. He went from a promising tech chief executive officer to a footnote in the story of Blackwood anger. Liam put a protective arm around Elora's shoulders. "I believe we are done here," he said into the mic, before letting it fall to the stage with a loud thud. It was like the final nail being hammered into William Vance's coffin. As the Blackwood family turned to go, a wall of their private security seemed to appear from nowhere, forming a perfect barrier around them. They walked through the stunned crowd with the calm purpose of a royal family leaving a disaster area. No one dared to speak to them. No one even dared to look them in the eye. They were like a force of nature that had just blown through, and the guests at the gala were just regular people looking at the damage. William was still on the stage, a sad statue in the harsh spotlight. The life he had built so carefully, the future he was so sure of, had been taken apart piece by piece in less than 5 minutes. He was a king who woke up to find his kingdom, his castle, and even his clothes were nothing more than a dream. He finally collapsed, not into a chair, but right onto the stage floor. He buried his head in his hands as dry, hacking sobs of pure despair shook his body. Meanwhile, Serafina was facing her own kind of social ruin. As the first shock faded, the other guests, especially the women she saw as rivals, started looking at her with a mix of pity and pure, open joy. In her world, perception was everything, the perception of power, of being on the winning side. She had tied her fate to William, thinking he was a rising star. And in the process, she had publicly and cruelly insulted a woman who turned out to be the sun. She tried to save the situation. She saw Auden Sterling, the wife of a rival media chief executive officer, and walked over with a shaky smile. "Can you believe this drama, Auden? It is just awful." Auden Sterling was a woman who knew which side her bread was buttered on. She just looked at Serafina's Cartier necklace, then at her face, and gave her a smile that was pure poison. "Awful? I think it is the most exciting thing I have seen all year. And you were perfectly cast as the court jester, Serafina." Then she turned her back on her. It was a social death sentence, so final that people nearby actually backed away from Serafina, as if she were contagious. Her father, Robin Dubois, would know about this by morning. His daughter had not just made a fool of herself. She had made a powerful, unforgiving enemy of the Blackwoods. The damage to his own media empire could be devastating. In her desperate attempt to climb the social ladder, Serafina had accidentally started a war she had no chance of winning. Her phone started buzzing with messages, but she already knew what they said. She knew who sent them, her furious father. Her fairy tale was officially over. Walking out between her father and brothers, Alara felt like she was floating. The giant, glittering ballroom from earlier now seemed cheap and tiny, and all those powerful people she had been so scared of, they just looked like scared little kids. She had not understood the power of the world she was born into, a power she had traded for a quiet life that turned out to be a lie. Just before the doors, she stopped for one last look. She saw William, a broken man, being helped off stage by a confused employee. Then she saw Serafina, alone in her red dress, an outsider in the very world she fought so hard to conquer. Alara felt no victory, no satisfaction, just a deep, aching sadness for the woman she's used to be, that trusting artist who actually believed in love. That version of herself died on the balcony tonight. But when her father's hand rested on her shoulder, guiding her into the cool New York night toward a line of black cars, she knew someone new was being born. Someone stronger, who would never forget her own name again. The air outside was crisp and cold. Liam opened the door to the first car, a custom Rolls-Royce Phantom. "Where to, Ellie?" he asked gently. She stared at the sparkling skyline, a city that finally felt like hers again. "Home," she said, her voice firm and clear. The Blackwood Tower. It wasn't a request, it was a declaration. She was done hiding away in that Brooklyn brownstone. She was Alara Blackwood, and she was going home. The life of Mrs. Vance was over for good. The real work of rebuilding herself was just beginning. The next few weeks were a silent hurricane of legal and financial moves, handled with ruthless speed by Marcus and Liam. Soon, William Vance had basically vanished from public life. His company was swallowed up by a Blackwood firm, its assets stripped clean, its name completely erased. He was forced into bankruptcy. The Brooklyn brownstone was sold to cover a tiny piece of his debt. Rumor has it, he was last seen working a dead-end job in a warehouse in New Jersey. He was just a ghost haunted by the life he had almost grabbed. Serafina Dubois didn't fare any better. Her father, in a panic, sent her on an indefinite retreat to a remote clinic in Switzerland. Her social media went dark. Her name was erased, and the vicious socialite became a whispered warning. She had flown too close to the sun and was burned. But Alara couldn't have cared less about their fates. She didn't have time for ghosts. She was too busy finding herself again. Living in the Blackwood Tower penthouse, a glass fortress over Central Park, she felt the 5-year fog finally start to lift. At first, her father and brothers were extremely protective, treating her like fragile, shattered glass. But they soon realized she was not broken, just dormant. One morning, Alistair found her in her private studio, a vast, sunlit space she had not entered since art school. He didn't find her with watercolors, but with giant canvases. She was made with thick, vibrant oil paints. Her old, gentle landscapes were gone. In their place were bold, abstract paintings filled with fury, sorrow, and a defiant sort of happiness. The colors were loud, the brushstrokes angry. It was the work of a woman who was finally taking up space. "This is powerful, Alara," Alistair said, his voice thick with emotion, looking at a canvas slashed with crimson against stormy blues. "I spent 5 years painting in pastels to keep the peace," she replied, her eyes fixed on her work. "I am done with pastels." With the full backing of the Blackwood Foundation, she planned her first solo exhibit. She did not want a quiet launch in some small gallery. She wanted to make a statement. Liam secured the entire ground floor of the MoMA for one night. The art world was buzzing. Who was this Alara Blackwood? An unknown artist backed by one of the most powerful families on the planet. The night of the exhibit was less of a party and more of a coronation. The room was filled, not with socialites, but with serious critics, collectors, and artists. Alara, in a stunning indigo gown, moved with a quiet confidence that was far more powerful than Serafina's loud arrogance. She wasn't Mrs. Vance, the wife, or Alara Blackwood, the heiress. She was simply Alara, the artist. Her work was a critical hit. The New York Times Review the next morning called her a vital, explosive new voice, her work a testament to the ferocious power of rebirth. Every single piece sold before the night was over. All the money went to a charity she had created to help struggling female artists. Late that night, after everyone had gone, Alara stood alone in the gallery, surrounded by her paintings. Her brother Liam came and stood beside her. "You did it, Ellie," he said softly. "You built something real out of the wreckage." "They thought my name was my power," she said, looking at the bold Alara signature on her favorite painting. "They never got it. The name just opens doors. What matters is what you do after you walk through." She had walked through a door of pain and into a gallery of light, color, and her own strength. The story of the crying wife at the Gala would just become old gossip. But the story of Alara, the artist, was only just beginning. She finally understood the lesson her father had tried to teach her long ago. She remembered who she was, and she would never let anyone define her again. 6 months after the MoMA show, Alara Blackwood was a name for artistic passion. Her work was famous. Her story was a modern legend. By all accounts, she had won, a phoenix rising from the ashes. But as she sketched in Central Park, she felt the familiar weight of prison bars, only this time they were made of solid gold. Her privacy was gone, a casualty of her own spectacular success. As Alara Vance, she could sit for hours watching light hit a flower, completely unnoticed. Now, she was a tourist attraction. People would whisper as they walked by, secretly pointing their phone cameras in her direction. "That's her," they would murmur. The artist, the Blackwood. The two names were now welded together by the drama of that night. She wanted her art to stand on its own, but it was always introduced by her family's powerful name. She was no longer William's wife, but she worried she was becoming her family's most valuable asset. That feeling became crystal clear during a meeting at the Guggenheim Foundation. They had invited her to join their acquisitions board, an honor she used to dream about. She came prepared, with notes on new artists she loved, artists who were bold and different. But the meeting was not really about art. "Alara, having you on this board changes everything," boomed the chairman, a heavy man named Mr. Davenport, with a greasy smile. "With the Blackwood name on our fundraiser, we will finally get the Rothko wing." Another member added, Exactly. Your brother Marcus's company is in tech. Perhaps you could convince him a digital art program would be a smart investment. Alara sat there, stunned. Her detailed notes suddenly felt silly and naive in her hands. They didn't want her expertise. They wanted her name. They didn't want her vision. They wanted her connections. She was a key, not an expert. The very power that saved her was now casting a golden shadow, threatening to smother the talent she fought to get back. Was this what her victory looked like? A promotion from a husband's accessory to a family's logo. That night, she found her brother Marcus in the library, a massive room smelling of dark wood and old leather. He was staring at financial reports on a tablet, the numbers as cold and logical as he was. "Marcus, we need to talk," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. He looked up, his expression neutral. "Is everything all right?" That night at the gala, she began carefully. "I am forever grateful. You, Liam, and Dad, you saved me. We protect our own," he said flatly, like it was a law of physics. "It is what we do. But the way you did it," she pushed, pacing before the huge fireplace, the demolition. "You did not just end a marriage. You wiped a man off the map. You used a nuclear bomb to solve a family problem." Marcus slowly set his tablet down, giving her his complete, unsettling attention. He humiliated a Blackwood in public. He was building a company on your support while planning to throw you away. That wasn't a domestic issue. It was an attack on our family. Our response matched the insult. "But don't you see what that did to me?" she asked, her voice rising with a passion that surprised them both. "You didn't just show them our power. You branded me with it. When people look at me now, they don't see an artist. They see a woman whose family can destroy a life with one phone call. My success feels fake now. Did the Times critic really love my work, or was he afraid of offending Alistair Blackwood's daughter? Did collectors buy my paintings, or were they just buying access to our power?" Her voice cracked a little on the last question. "You saved me from William, yes. But did you ever think you were trapping me in something else? This name feels heavier than ever." Marcus was quiet. He studied her like an analyst solving a puzzle. "I see," he said. His voice wasn't cruel, just cold. "You're mixing up the tool with the result. Our name, our power, it's just a tool. That is all. It can be a shield, the way it was for you that night, or it can be a battering ram. The fact that it puts a spotlight on you is just a side effect. The world, Alara, is not a gallery judging pure talent. It is a battlefield. You were hurting, so we removed the threat." He got up and walked to the massive window, looking down at the city lights. "You ask if there was another way to handle it. Perhaps. A quiet divorce, a settlement, and you would have been the poor, tragic artist who was cheated on in public. He would have found success with his new wife, and you would have just been a footnote in his life story. We gave you a better one, a story of strength, not of being a victim. Yes, our name is now part of that story. It is your birthright. Resenting it is like resenting the shield that keeps you safe." He turned to face her. "The real question is not what the name does to you, Alara. The question is, what will you do with the name?" As cold and practical as they were, his words hit a nerve deep inside her. He was right. She had been so focused on the shadow her name cast, she forgot she controlled the light. She could remain a passive symbol for others to use, or she could start wielding her influence with the same purpose as a brushstroke on a canvas. The following week, Alara strode back into the Guggenheim boardroom. She accepted the position. Mr. Davenport began to clap loudly, but she simply raised a hand, silencing him. "I am accepting this position as an artist, not as a fundraiser," she said, her voice full of new authority. "My focus will be on the art and nothing else. And my first proposal is this. The Blackwood Foundation will fund a new prize every 2 years, called the Emergence Prize. It will be the largest grant for an undiscovered artist in the world." A murmur of excitement went through the room. However, she continued, Looking at each person at the table, it comes with one non-negotiable condition. The judging process will be completely blind. The selection committee will only see the artwork, no names, no backstory, no gallery connections, just pure talent, and talent alone. I want to find the artists who do not have a powerful family opening doors for them. I want to find the talent that is screaming to be heard from the quietest corners of the world. The room went silent. She had taken their hunger for prestige and flipped it into an act of pure artistic integrity. She was not rejecting her power, she was reshaping it. It was like using a sledgehammer to gently crack open a door for someone else. In that moment, it all became clear. Her name was not a shadow or a brand. It was a responsibility. William and Serafina saw power as a weapon for personal gain. Her family saw it as a shield for their own protection. But she would make it a lantern to light the way for others who were lost in the dark, just like she had been. She was Alara Blackwood, the artist, and she was finally ready to create her masterpiece, not just on a canvas, but on the world. Ultimately, this was not just a story about getting even. It was a story about identity. Alara's greatest victory was not watching her enemies fall. It was finding her own voice. She had to lose the name Vance to truly become Alara. So often in life, we let ourselves be defined by relationships or jobs, dimming our own light just to make other people comfortable. But real power is sleeping inside all of us, just waiting for a reason to wake up. Alara's journey is a powerful reminder that hitting rock bottom can be the only way to build a foundation strong enough for the masterpiece you were meant to create. If this story about strength and finding your own path resonated with you, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and subscribe for more true stories that inspire and empower. And do not forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching.